and welcome to the Wednesday, October 16th, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. First on the agenda are minutes of October 2nd.
We did last week.
Minutes of October 9th. Read, we get them the next day while it's fresh in our minds. Yeah, that's what I say too.
Yep, I make a motion to accept the October 9th, 2013 minutes as written.
Second?
Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Request for determination of applicability. Richard Zanga, 16 Monterey, excuse me, maybe I'm wishing I was in California. Montgomery Court, East Falmouth, for permission to install an 18-foot by 45-foot in-ground swimming pool with pool fence.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the staff reviewed the project. It's entirely within land subject to coastal storm flowage and outside the 100-foot buffer to any resource area. Therefore, we're recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions? Any questions from the audience? Those, if anybody is here for an RDA, a negative determination means it's not going to fill, excavate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you can go ahead with the project as you've agreed with staff. Okay, there's a motion on the table for, to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Cahone Santuit Realty Trust, 80 Santuit Road, for permission to construct a 4-bedroom, single-family house with attached garage, install a Title V sewage disposal system, dry wells, utilities, pervious driveway extension, connect to town water, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the staff has reviewed the project, and we are recommending a -2 under the state and bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, second on the table. Are there any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay. Motion is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Continued request for a determination of applicability. Pinecrest Beach Improvement Association, Lakeshore Drive, map 2204-026 000A, East Falmouth, for permission to open a 4-foot path in the existing 10-foot wide right-of-way for access to Jenkins Pond and to install a split rail fence.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we've reviewed the project, and based on the survey done by BSF, the sign the path does go, is the Pinecrest Beach Homeowners Association property is being encroached on. So if you look at the plan, the path goes right through someone's driveway. It's because this particular driveway is encroaching on 2 separate properties along with their own set. We have no concerns with the work that's being done. So -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
Is this a site that I know that I've been on?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Myskina Rowan, 129 Ostrom Road, Wacoit, for permission to repave the existing driveway and install a gravel drainage strip and regrade and plant the drainage basin.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we've reviewed the project and we are recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved?
Second.
Any questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Request for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are heard simultaneously under the authority of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Beverly Baker, 353 Edgewater Drive West, East Falmouth, for permission to install native mitigation plantings for unpermitted deck expansion under the expired Order of Conditions DEP 25-337. and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Mr. Bunker's presentation.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. Cards.
Thanks.
Thank you for the record. My name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. We prepared this plan for Beverly Baker. As the notice said, we're requesting permission to allow an unpermitted deck to remain and to plant mitigation planting in its place. I'll give you some background. I have some pictures and pictures and part of the approved site plan done in 1981 by Charlie Spoor. See on that plan, the small deck on the north side of the house was permitted, but not this deck, which was built on the water side of the house. I gave you those pictures there so you can see that the deck was being built at the same time as the house. It's not an afterthought. It didn't come after the building department inspected it. You got the stickers in the windows, the new framing on the deck, new shingles. It was built at the same time. You see in one of those pictures there's a slider. The building department, of course, would not allow a slider to be built on the back side of the house if there was also not in the plans a deck or some egress in that side there. The point of this is that you went through, let's say that the deck part of it went through half of the proper channels to get where we are today. It was approved by the building department and inspected by the building department. Generally, order of conditions was granted for the house with a small deck, but not this entire deck. Probably at that time, certainly the owners, Beverly Baker, did not know they had to go back for more permitting from Conservation Commission, probably in 1981 or 82. Things were perhaps a little more lax then anyway, and the building department didn't say they had to go back for more permitting either. Anyway, we have this here. I'd like to show you, there's a lengthy letter in the file from Mark Kasperzik about all the violations on this property. So there's some more pictures.
Thank you.
There's the top picture, and that shows the house which was here before this. But these pictures that show the vegetation that's on the site. In Mark's letter, he commented a lot about vegetation that was removed. The house on that site burned in the 70s, and you can see in that picture there's no vegetation. And on the 1981 plan by Charlie Spoor, it mentions an existing foundation, and the foundation got enlarged. And that was the foundation for this house. Left over from this house after it burned. So you can see that would date this picture somewhat back to the late 70s, I suppose. And the picture with the flagpole is a later picture, but it shows still that it's roughly how it was back then as far as vegetation.
Now, Tom, just for clarification, please.
Yes.
The picture with the flagpole is looking from the road to the water as opposed to the other one, water to the road?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, this is from the house.
And from the new house.
okay.
See, in the picture of the old house, there's no flagpole, so that flagpole was after the new house was built, but it's,
Okay.
I don't know exactly when the picture was taken.
That's looking west.
Okay, just want to be,
But it has You know, the same table, the pavers that are shown here, you can see pavers around the flagpole,
Yep.
whatever. Just to show that it's roughly the same. It's been that way for a long time, basically. That's the background. I have the calculations in here. There's between the difference between the existing and the proposed deck was 598 square feet of extra structure built. There's a little bit of wooden paving or whatever on the ground there, and that's just to be removed. At 598 square feet. They are in the A zone to the entire, pretty much the entire house, and certainly all the deck is within the A zone to the salt marsh. So we have a 3-to-1 mitigation planting required. In the narrative that I put in this one on here, we're just proposing 1,000 square feet. Just feeling that true, they didn't get the proper, they didn't go back a second time to the conservation, but I think they did everything in good faith that they knew they had to do to build this deck. It's different from other projects you get that somebody comes back for, you know, after things are signed off and does it, and might build something without any permitting. The owner certainly and the builder, everybody thought they were on the right page for doing this. So we've shown this with 1,000 square feet. Mr. Baker, who is Beverly's brother, they're both somewhat, I don't want to say elderly, but they're older. He did a lot of the planting himself. He did pretty much all the planting himself. Somebody who'd been out there find fault with it. It wasn't the best job, and I think he'll have to, you know, pull that up, redo it somewhat to make it to your satisfaction and to make it so they'll survive. But I hope that you can see your way toward approving this with reduced mitigation planting based on the circumstances of this project. That's it.
Jen?
My only concern, Tom, is that your client knew they had to come before conservation to permit the deck, well, come before us to legitimize the deck. Yet they went out and started digging around in the buffer to the resource area anyway to install the mitigation plantings that have not been approved yet.
Yes, they
That would be
did.
a yes.
Hmm?
That would be a yes.
That's a yes, yes. And that was,
Plantings will
Yes.
not survive the way they're planted. Do you know when they were put in?
about a week and a half ago.
Have they even been watered since then?
There's a hose down there. I don't know if they watered
Yeah,
more.
staff is really kind of concerned the way those plantings are in. But other than that, I really don't have any issues with the deck.
Proposed.
I just really think this board needs to
Project.
kind of condition those plantings because they will not survive.
No, they're-
Those were popped
you
in
know
for
that.
the sake of this board in this hearing, and there was no thought given to how they were installed at all, so.
Yeah.
yeah.
Court?
The house, just quickly, the house was built when?
1982.
81.
In 82, and they had an order of conditions.
Correct.
Order was
And-
issued in late
and-
81.
And was there a certificate of compliance issued for that order?
No, that's.
No,
So
that's-
there's no certificate.
There's no certificate.
And they got a building permit for the deck?
They got a building permit. I saw the building permit. You know, they're very small permits back then. It said house, whatever, and not specifically for this size.
And there's
Not
no,
this deck,
and
no.
there's no, there was no plan filed with the building department that would show this deck in that configuration?
No.
Well, there must have been at one time or another.
Okay.
That,
I mean, the
So
That was what.
when was this deck put on?
In 1982.
Same time as the
1982,
house.
Same time
as the
house was
house
built.
was,
And it wasn't permitted, so basically, I have no sympathy for it. I think you start, take the damn deck off, and then come back and ask for permission to put the deck on. Because it moves closer to the resource area. I mean, that's a lot of footprint. That's looks like, just eyeballing, it's almost 20% of the footprint of the house. You know, that's a lot. So,
by-
take
by-
it off, come back, that's my feeling.
By today's standards,
I
it
mean,
moves
obviously,
closer.
huh?
By today's standards, it moved closer. By 1982 standards, I feel certain, I mean, if the builder had gone in
Why are
there,
we looking at this now, then? Are they trying to
They
sell
need
the
a
property?
certificate of compliance, Courtney.
yeah, they're
This is
try-
to get it.
No,
They need a
I'm not gonna
certificate of
approve.
compliance 'cause
I'm
the
not-
house is
yeah,
currently on the
I'm not
market.
gonna approve anything short of having it removed, but that's me.
What's being removed in the front and?
Wait a
middle?
second.
Hold on.
Sorry.
I haven't gotten to you. Tommy,
And you're looking for a reduction in the required mitigation as if it was to be built today?
Correct.
yes.
Okay. I'm in favor of keeping it, but it looks like you have the space to come up to today's code for your, for your compliance today, so I'd be in favor of keeping the deck with the full 1,794 square feet of mitigation.
another 794 plus 1,000 in good shape.
Basically 800 square feet more, yeah.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Tom?
I have every confidence that this is with no malice and that this was done totally with good conscience, both by builder and applicant. The building department would require the deck on the back with the slider. It did have all its inspections. This was just something that fell between the cracks. This is not anything to lose sleep over. 32 years ago, every confidence that this would have been approvable. I do mirror Tom's comment, and I'm sure others, that the plantings unfortunately aren't really satisfactorily in the ground. It's in your best interest for now and in perpetuity to have a clean slate. This is the process that we're gonna use to get there. It's a little hurdle, it's not a big one. In the scheme of things, it's gonna create a better habitat and buffer. It's just gonna be a little bit more work to get there. But as far as anything coming off the house, I'm not gonna even entertain that.
Mike?
I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. There is, at the south end of the deck, there is a deck that was built after the original deck. That will add on.
Yes.
That was not part of the original. There is a 10-inch tree that was cut down relatively recent on the south side of the property.
That was in Mark's letter about that tree.
I mean, it's there,
That was- yeah.
you go
Oh,
out
yeah,
and you look at
definitely.
it,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
there it is. So, with that, some planting that replaces at least that, and I can't see any real malice here. I can't see, taking the deck off. So that's where I see.
Aria?
I'm not gonna use the word malice, but I can tell you what the scenario I see is that when this illegal deck went up back in '82, they didn't go through the CERTA compliance procedure because they knew they wouldn't get one with that deck on there. That's 700 some odd square feet of illegal structure. I agree with Courtney. I think the deck should come down, and then they can come back in for a new deck. Also, can you explain why the plantings are already in place, the so-called proposed plantings?
That was, I think it was a miscommunication between Mark and me, and then Bill Baker, Beverly's brother. I had talked with Mark about hopefully if we can expedite it, because the planting season is getting close to the end and I suggested asking if Mr. Baker could start doing some of the planting to get it in, and if this were approved, then they could get a compliance on it. And
Who did the plantings, do you know?
Bill Baker did the planting.
Yeah. You can kind of tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got a monoculture of bayberry, about 100 plants, I believe. very poorly planted. The root ball literally
Yeah.
is higher than the ground level. And it hasn't even been backfilled or fertilized or anything.
Yeah.
Those plants have
Saw
a
it.
zero probability of surviving one growing season. And we're trying to get away from monocultures for mitigation.
Right.
So I would seek more diversity and a professional landscaper planting these things so they have a reasonable idea of surviving. And you do have enough there to give us that 17 square feet of mitigation.
Yeah.
You would admit that. So maybe we can retrofit that to include a little more species diversity and
Right.
proper emplacement of the bayberry.
Lori?
Well, I didn't get to see the site, so I was just curious what you're removing in front of the deck.
Oh, there's just a little wooden,
Just a little
not even really platform, just a bit of wood, like wood decking that's on the ground. That would be counted as impervious surface, so I didn't count that in the mitigation calculations because it just said we'll take that out.
And the fire pit, that's gone now too?
That's gone, yes.
Tom, I have a couple, are you done, Lori?
Yes, thank you.
As long as we're on, I'll continue with your list and then I'll get on to mine. And the grid that's in the uppermost planting, is that disappearing also? Yeah.
That, some of that was taken up, looks like it hasn't been fully planted in yet. Some of those stones
That's
were.
going to be removed?
Yes,
All those pieces will be removed?
yes.
Okay, for those of you who might not have gotten out to the site, under the deck is a brick patio. So in fact, this footprint is already impervious surface there. Is this what you're talking about as extra?
Yes.
Okay, so,
That little thing was put in as she was getting older, as a little ramp kind of thing to help her get on and off the deck.
yeah, I think for this part of the reason that this is going for compliance is that they're gonna be selling this, right?
Yes,
So I agree that especially that footprint should go, which may reduce your mitigation plannings a little bit. But to get onto the question of trees, not only should the tree that was just cut be replaced, but we should have 2 trees per 1,700 square feet of mitigation plantings. So
yes.
I think we should see a new plan with a new planning plan, including the trees and everything that's going to be removed.
I can explain about that. Actually, their neighbor is here who can talk a little more about, actually, that spruce tree, the one that was cut, is actually in the edge of this picture. That was storm damage. I think was it Hurricane Bob?
It was completely dead.
Actually, okay, it was completely dead when they cut it down. She's
Okay, well,
quite,
give us 2 trees then.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it had
well, you
no leaves, nothing.
should talk to them. You'll have to come up here and
Yeah.
introduce yourself. She was completely dead and it was taken down because it was dead.
Okay, but we still need trees.
Mhm.
And I definitely agree with Mario. I like to see diversity in
Yeah,
the buffer.
absolutely.
Diversity of species, diversity of heights, and so forth. Yeah, I checked that. It's to be
Get
removed.
rid of the little section, add the more plantings, get some trees, and this should be okay.
Can you give us another plan by next week?
Yes.
Jen, what do things look like? I'll come back to you, Court.
How quick can you get me a plan, Tom?
Not until Monday.
You can have the 30th. Is that, is that okay?
If that's the best we can do. I mean, yeah, if,
You don't want to know what the alternative is. The alternative is December 4th.
I'll take the 30th.
Yeah, they're busy on the 23rd. That one's not going to be heard.
Could
Yeah,
we,
The 30th, unless you guys want to do that to me again. And you want if they can get the plan in on Monday, but that doesn't give you guys a week to review it.
no? Okay. 30th.
On behalf of the applicant, I move to continue this hearing till the 30th.
Second.
Okay, Court, you have a question?
I just wanted to further comment on the concept of doing work without a permit and then coming and asking for permission to do it. First of all, I'm not, in my comments were not looking into the motives of the people who did the work. And I don't question that they acted in good faith and all of that. I also agree with you that, you know, when this house was permitted and built back in 1982, things were different. But what concerns me about this, and this is one of the reasons why I sound like a broken record when it comes to issues of doing work and then coming in and asking permission. An engineer, who will remain nameless, before I came on this commission, said to me when I was working on a project that fell within conservation's jurisdiction, well, don't. I said, I think I need to go get permission to do this. And the engineer advised me not to do that, but to go ahead and do the work, because it's easier to beg for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission.
That was a common refrain back then.
Yeah. And that particular engineer
give
still
that
comes in.
advice now, would
And that engineer, by the way, still comes in front of this commission. And so it really troubles me, because I'm concerned about the message that we as a commission send out to the general public when we approve something retroactive. You see, that's what really has me going on these things. And I know that some of my fellow commissioners disagree with me on this, and I also understand the pragmatic realities of it. But nevertheless, I'm very, very troubled about these kinds of applications because of the message that it sends. That it's okay if you go ahead and do something and come in and ask for to approve it later on. That's what's bothering me about all of this. And that's why I'm taking the position that I am, which is they should remove this, then come in and get it permitted. I don't have any problem permitting it and having it mitigated and all of that.
They couldn't get it permitted now.
Well, then
This has been here for
that creates an interesting dilemma.
32 years.
Anyway, that's my comment, and it's a position that I've taken in the past, and I will take on this, and I will take in the future.
I think it's really sad that there's a professional out there telling people this.
Right, and part of it comes from the fact that I'm in the building business, or was, and so, you know, I always tried to follow the orders and conditions. I always read them, and I tried to do the thing right. So it really troubles me when I see this stuff come in front of me, because it runs counter to everything ethically that I tried to do.
I agree, and I mean, everybody now, I hope, is much more educated about the whole process. And I think that's part of the difference in this case. That
I mean,
I think,
I've made my
I
point.
know the owner didn't know.
Yeah.
And
I made my point, that's
Yeah.
it. I don't want to say anything.
October 30th.
Made motion.
Yeah, we already have a motion.
Can you,
Lori?
Doesn't this set some kind of precedent?
No.
No, if this is an existing and they're meeting the,
So
The
somebody
current-
else that has an existing, non-approved extension to their home, when they decide to sell it, could come back and say the exact same thing.
With a
Absolutely.
building permit from 32 years ago, I'd have the
Right.
same position.
Yeah, if it's, and I will be very clear on this, this is something that was inspected. The plan that was approved by the building department, this is not just like last year they did this, or even 10 years ago with all the newer buffer regulations. This is something that was done when the original house on a burnt foundation in a very typical manner. It is not exceedingly excessive. It is something that is very typically done. This is not an exorbitant, huge, it's nothing that would jump out and say something terrible. I mean, it's a deck with a walkout basement. This is very, very typical of that time period, typical construction. They would have had to have had some kind of egress off the back of that house, period, because of the structure that was inspected with the slider and all that. They would have had something by code to accomplish this. Now, 32 years later, with hat in hand, they're coming, there was an attempt by someone who was inexperienced, unfortunately, about planting materials. We're going to correct that. We're going to correct the permitting of this deck. This is not a perfect world. We don't have perfect solutions, but this is something, just move it on. Let's just go to the 30th, get this behind us. It's not, we've got bigger fish to fry.
I will tell you, Lori, that this board has required the removal of decks and patios like this a couple of months ago, and those did not have a valid building permit. And those structures needed to be removed before the house could be sold, and that did happen. If you had gone out, if you were able to find the site, just check your MapQuest, never trust MapQuest. You would see just the style of the deck, and I am never for allowing an unpermitted structure to remain because of the precedent it might set, but I think I agree with Mike that the little extension might have to go. But this, just to let you know that this board has required the removal of structures that weren't properly permitted before. And that was, what, within the last 6 months?
Maybe a
Last
year
year.
ago.
A year, within a year, so.
Even the building department, we even threw it back to the building department.
Yes, well,
We weren't gonna let them do it, but the building department did. Was that your project too?
it was.
It was your project.
How do I get them all? That was a case where somebody had built a house
And
under
then
an
they
order
kinda kept
conditions.
adding on to the house.
And then
without
after that was
getting
inspected,
permission from
added
anybody.
on and did cutting.
And had shed on the other people's
And a
property.
shed.
and
Oh,
all kinds of happenings.
patios.
Yeah.
So there are more occasions for the newcomer to the board, there are more occasions where we can flex muscles, but this is nothing to flex muscles over.
Well, you know what, I'm gonna be the skunk at the garden party again here. I think we are setting a precedent if we permit a non-conforming, unlicensed structure of over 700 square feet. For one thing, the deck is in very bad shape. Tom, you could take it down in 1 hour with a sledgehammer. It's really rickety. So actually rebuilding the deck,
And
They're probably gonna rebuild, whoever buys it is
This
gonna
property
rebuild
is
the
gonna
whole
be
house.
erased and rebuilt.
right.
yeah, so
That's true.
that's where, look at the, if you wanna look at the timeline of the structure, if that was then, this is now, what's coming in the future is gonna be something that, no matter what activity in the future, we're gonna be able to regulate that a whole lot more than what
And
was
this would have
then.
been permitted at the time.
And you'll get 1,800 square feet of planting out of it
Right,
where
right,
you
which is the
wouldn't
whole
otherwise.
idea of having,
Right.
redoing the buffer regulation.
So,
Yeah.
I just want to ask, I know this is not part of the application, but the comment has just been made that it's very likely that this house will be torn down and rebuilt. Would the position of this commission be that the deck would also be part of the footprint, and therefore somebody building a new house could include that deck as part of this?
Yes, that's what we're saying.
Yes, it's all impervious surface. Yes,
Yes.
that would be my position.
Yes.
No
Yes,
comment.
Mike.
With respect to Mario's comment, assuming the building stays, and I think everybody has the right to assume it is going to stay, you have to have a deck because of that slider. So would they be back putting in some deck, and the question is it smaller or larger? I say we get back to putting the addention off. The deck functions as it is.
Well, Mike, I'm not saying that.
There we go. That's where, and I am very much in, Courtney said it very well. If we're going to expect people to follow the rules, there has to be consequences to not following the rules. So I understand the dilemma, but I think we're here to protect the resources as best we can, and we can do it in this case.
Especially by adding buffer plantings.
Yes, we have.
Correct. I also want to just make a comment. Unlike some of my fellow commissioners who are in the building trade or who do permitting and so forth, although I have been on regulatory boards in the past, my background is like Courtney's, education and also science. And any comment about people who have these should know this, that, and the other. I can tell you when I came here and I got a bill the first time for my car from the town of Falmouth, I was livid. I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, that's your car tax that you have to pay." And I said, "I never heard of this." And so I think there are a lot of people who have no idea of how these, something that was built, over 30 years ago, I'm sure they didn't even know. At any rate, we have a motion and second on the table for a continuance to the 30th. I'm hoping my fellow board members have nothing more to say, but I'm going to turn it to the audience if anybody wants to say anything.
You'd have to get up here.
Yep, you have to get up and tell us who you are if you want to say anything. Otherwise, you can sit there and report back.
I am Carol Tierney, and I live next door to Beverly Baker. And I just have to say, these people never had any intention of breaking the law if you knew them. Beverly is the most upstanding person. This is 32 years ago. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, in good faith, they had a builder. The deck went on when the house was built.
Right.
They got this, I don't know what you call all these things, but occupancy, all that was approved.
Right.
It isn't their fault that someone from the Conservation Commission didn't okay it.
Well,
32 years ago.
in a way it is but they probably didn't realize this.
Of course.
But someone who worked for them had the responsibility of making sure there was a certificate of compliance.
Yeah, not the Concom.
And it's not the Conservation Commission's responsibility, it's the person who has the order. But I'm sure it was an oversight.
Oh, of course it was.
Yeah, so, but I mean, just realize that's what the process is. People don't know, it's not like the Conservation Commission can call, it's not Jen's responsibility to call Tom to say, by the way, Tom, is your client gonna be starting that project? Would you like to set up a meeting? No, it's Tom's responsibility to call Jen and say, my client's starting a project, can we get together?
Finishing a project.
Or to go the other way when the project's finished.
But I mean, to penalize these people and ripping the deck down and building, that is just awful.
Well, it wouldn't be
32
allowed.
years ago.
You couldn't have the house as it is without a deck because there's a slider that goes onto it.
Right.
Yeah. So we're moving along, and what's gonna happen is the property is actually gonna better protect the resources once this is all done, and your friends, your neighbors will have a certificate of compliance, and it'll be a clear sale.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Motion for,
We have a motion and a second for a continuance till October 30th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Continued request for hearings under a notice of intent. Nancy and Edward Shute, trustees, 58 off Sam Turner Road, AKA Williams Hollow Way, East Falmouth, for permission to raise, RAZE, the existing dwelling and construct a 3-bedroom, single-family house with deck and porch with stairs, porches, screens, second floor, deck with stairs, to pump and fill and abandon the existing cesspools, install a new Title V sewage disposal system, utilities, dry wells, native mitigation plantings in the existing leaf dump and driveway, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. And Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Dave's presentation.
No, but I'm also calling you because I know I'm not on this quorum.
Nobody's on this quorum, it hasn't been opened yet.
No. That's not what we said. We said it was continued.
Oh, we did? I'm sorry.
Did you open it?
I'm sorry, Dave, did you open this? No.
I asked you if I should attend the hearing, and you said no.
No, I think you wrote it down. We did not open this hearing.
It's
no.
continued, but
Because you didn't have natural heritage's
that
letter.
doesn't count.
Yeah. You might have just written it down, but it was a continuance because we didn't have natural heritage's letter.
Works
You
for
haven't-
me, John.
Yeah,
I'm
you
just
haven't
the
heard this yet.
secretary here, too.
It's like, you are wrong.
You got it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, David Martin here on behalf, excuse me, of the Shoots. And in fact, we do have natural heritage. The Shoots have about a 2¼ acre lot with an existing house on it. You'll see down in the bottom left where I say the site is subject to the following regulations. It's a priority habitat, estimated habitat, zone 2 of public water supply, and a water resource protection district. So what that tells us is the Zone A, no disturbance zone, is 100 feet, shown on the plan. They would like to demolish that house and effectively build a new house in the same location, pump and fill the cesspool, install a new Title V septic system well beyond that 100-foot no disturbance zone. The house will be pre-constructed on site. It's a prefab house that'll limit the activity on the site during the construction phase. Mitigation plantings are provided. You'll see the calculations up in the top left. There's a lower driveway we're going to use for temporary construction access, and an existing leaf dump that would be removed after construction and replanted. That's it in a nutshell.
Is that it?
that's it.
Jen?
No question.
I had to just sort of absorb it.
Sure.
I know
No,
this
take
site.
take a good look.
It's a
Plenty of
pretty
time.
site.
I did, it's a beautiful site.
It's an absolutely gorgeous site.
Laura, you probably didn't even get this one.
No, I
So
don't
we'll
think so,
we'll
Madam
just pass
Chairman.
right over you and go to Mario.
Um,
But Lori, even though you haven't seen this, you can come in and look at this. You'll be on the quorum.
I don't usually criticize fisheries and wildlife, but I have to respectfully disagree. There already has been an impact to rare plant species habitat at the shoreline. from the previous owner's recreational use of the shoreline, there's already a wide swath that has no plants, because they used it for recreational purposes. And that was with an old hunting lodge, I believe. It looks like an old hunting
If it's
lodge.
an old house, cottage, built perhaps in the 20s, I think I referenced the date in the notice.
What I'm
It's the
saying
same,
is,
and the owner
when
has
you
been...
convert an old hunting lodge to a three-bedroom house, David, there's gonna be more pressure on that shoreline, because there's gonna be more people using the property, correct?
I don't know what the future holds, but it's been in the family for 3 generations. It's the same family who have the house and are building a new house. They can't do work to this house because there's no way to have it meet any of the present construction codes. So, either
Well,
they
like I
wait
said-
for it to fall down around their ears, or they...
I mean, we
take-
do know that this is a globally imperiled ecosystem at Crooked Pond.
Right.
It's well-known to scientists, and it has been for decades, as being one of the prime examples of coastal plain pond shore in the town, and perhaps in the Cape. There already has been an impact to that globally rare plant community. And what I'm saying is, the conversion of an old hunting lodge to a 3-bedroom house, seems to me there'd be more pressure brought to bear on that shoreline. I don't know if they have any plans in the future for a dock or a beach or...
I don't think they have any plans other than the house is deteriorated, and they need to address that to continue to live in it. I know there's a couple who've owned the house, and they intend to live in the house. That's all I can tell you about how the house will be used.
I also don't think it justifies a NISA exemption.
I can't
mean,
speak
I know
for
that's
them.
what they say, and,
I
but
just asked.
there's gonna be some significant trees taken down for this project, correct?
I don't believe so.
What about the
We've done,
2-foot diameter white oak?
we would like to preserve that white oak. There may be some limbing that needs to take place
There's a
direct,
horizontal limb that you
right
could
over,
get rid of.
right over the
No,
house.
I understand that.
I think the property in many ways speaks to the owner's responsibility to the environment and how they feel about how they occupy that property. There's no, the history shows us that they are not interested in having lawn, landscape, expand their use of the area. So I would say nominally no on the trees.
Well, if you can make a good faith effort to save that white oak, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's probably over 100 years old. I mean,
Absolutely, that's the intention of the owner.
there is that overhanging horizontal limb that comes
Right.
over the roof line, and I can
Right.
see just limbing that off.
So I think this is a finding that can be made and a condition on it. And also, I just want to bring up your point about use of the shoreline. I
Right.
think that should also be a finding, Jen, that it's a fine example.
Yeah.
What's the term?
Coastal plain pond shore.
Coastal plain
pond shore.
pond
yeah.
shore. Got that?
Oh,
Coastal plain pond shore. And a condition, I think that will go along with that, minimal, there should be minimal impact. There's a trail,
There's a
but
footpath.
beyond that footpath, there should be minimal impact on the shoreline.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. Anything else? Mike?
Doing what you can to preserve the trees is clearly high on my list.
Right.
I'm sure you will. You wouldn't know you were in Falmouth. It's a beautiful little
Isn't it
place.
quite remarkable?
And may the owners take beautiful care of it.
Thank you.
That's it.
Court?
No questions.
Tom?
No questions.
Tom?
No questions.
No question.
I'd like to see a dry well detail. There's not a, we usually have a typical cross-section showing a
I
dry
think
well.
you have a
Is that-
definition of it there. Is that sufficient?
Well, a cross-section showing it just so that you're having what typical components you're gonna have.
16 by 24.
Yeah,
16 by 24.
the description is that if you have a picture, it just makes it a little bit easier to, I appreciate that, there's something else I want to give you kudos for too. In your narrative, additionally, one of the things that we are receiving here is a Title V septic system and a restoration of previously altered buffer, a 9-inch straw wattle, which I think is a great choice as opposed to the straw bales. I like in there, I like your site management. I know that you have field experience because of the way you describe things is very simple. And being a simple person myself, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I got that comment about my scientific papers too. I wasn't sure it was a compliment though.
Yeah, well,
We'll
this
take
is,
this
this is meant as a compliment.
Take 'em when they
Describing
come.
where you're placing your roll-off container and the site management on there. To alleviate some of the concern for other board members with the crane that they're gonna use, pre-constructed off-site delivered in panel units. It's manageable pieces, not like half a house type of thing. And the next sentence, this will greatly reduce the time required for on-site construction and the incidental site impacts associated with parking vehicles of multiple subcontractors. That's big. That's huge.
Especially in a site like
Yeah,
this.
when you limit, I appreciate your fret for the activities on the water's edge. My concern is always during construction, the havoc that can happen during here. I do appreciate your narrative.
Thank
It covers a lot of bases. I'm going to be referencing some of this in the order of conditions. Again, the mention about the dry wells. And again, the stewards of this property for however, since the 20s, we have to take, there are not huge vistas cut, there are not huge paths in places. So I think that this is the progression of what was into what is, and performance standards are being met. And then also, it's my neighborhood. So, you know, you really do get to appreciate some finer parts of Hatchville.
And with that, are there any other questions on the board? We could get this
Yes,
into the record.
yes.
Do we need any other information?
I don't think so.
Move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. John Billings, Gunning Point, John Billings, 57 Gunning Point Avenue, Falmouth, for permission to construct a 5-bedroom, single-family house with attached garage, porch, patio, to install a Title V sewage disposal system, dry wells, utilities, driveway, retaining wall, connect to town water, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
need to recuse myself.
Oh, that's right.
I was gonna say, your name's crossed off. Name's crossed off. Madam Chairman, Tommy, Mario, Mike, Betsy, and Tom.
Good evening, Mike. Thank you.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and registered professional land surveyor. I work for Holmes & McGrath. We filed the plans and some of the narratives that were accompanied, that were filed for tonight's hearing. Accompanying me tonight is Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants and Brian Wall, an attorney. What I like to do is I filed a letter dated October 9th, and what I'd like to do is go through the points I made in my letter first. What I did was, last time I gave you out individual copies, and unfortunately I can't find the big size 24 by 36 inch color plan, but these are very similar And what I did here is I highlighted in yellow the major changes that we did.
Thank you.
During the initial hearing, you raised concerns about the location of the floodplain boundary of the velocity zone, whether the resource area buffers were properly located, and we also agreed to clarify the proposed grading along the southern boundary line. Attached to my letter of October 9th was two overlays that were, one was called SK3, stapled to SK4. The Falmouth flood insurance rate maps were originally prepared in 1975, and they're based on the town topographic maps. We're a unique town in that most towns, the original floodplain maps were based on quadrangle maps. So what that allows us to do is more precisely locate floodplain boundaries in Falmouth than in most towns. So what we did on SK3 and SK4, we showed you what points we used as control points when we basically set a baseline to determine exactly where the floodplain boundaries are located. So we used a base map from groin A to groin B on the overlay SK3 and SK4. Those are the same scale. They are stapled, so they're precisely over each other. And what we also did then was we blew them up and we labeled, again, we made you an overlay that showed you SK3A stapled on top of SK4A. And one of the problems we have with the floodplain maps is they have an opaque layer that represents the land subject to coastal storm flowage. And so when we tried to just merge the two, you couldn't see the details from the town topographic map. So we have used a technique that I've shown you or described as to show you how we determine the velocity zone boundary. One of the things that we do is we try to be conservative. If you go and you look at SK3A, you can scale, since it's drawn a 100-foot scale, the same as the town maps. And what I've done here, and I should have done this earlier, was this orange line is the velocity zone line that's shown on the overlay. We can use photo identifiable points, and what I did was there's a pole here that's common with the town topographic map, and on our plan shows 176 feet, and you scale here 186 feet. On this side, we scale 182, and it actually scales on our plan to be 165 feet. When I questioned the registered surveyor that did this, he said his intent was to show this to be the most landward location of the velocity zone. So he did do that, and we have used the best procedure to locate that. Since this is an area that where we can reproduce these, we believe that we have been conservative in the location of the velocity zone, and we do not believe it's appropriate to add the 25 feet. So the next question was, we asserted that there were resource area buffers were limited because of the type of coastal banks as described in your regulation, and the commission asked me why this didn't come down in an arc. This didn't come down in an arc because you asserted that you thought that there should be arcs like it was a wetland. And what I did was I quoted several times from your regulation that these resource area buffers are all, for coastal banks are always landward. It's always landward, and if we do it that way, we're actually not moving landward, we're moving 90 degrees to landward. So we believe that it's appropriately located. We quoted your regulations 5 different times. I don't want to go into the kind of minutia there, but we also had a file that we did, DEP 25-3626, 18 Associates Road, that we showed exactly the same designation of the buffer zones, and you accepted it. So we believe that the resource area to a coastal buffer zone always extends landward and perpendicular to the slope, and it doesn't go parallel by the way the definition is. In the
Mike, can you
event,
speak up and stop mumbling, because she can't hear you? You just kind of blah, blah. Just speak up, please, thank you, and be a little bit more clear, thank you.
yes.
Susan can't hear you.
Now, I wanted to talk about buffer zones and presumptions. In the event you don't agree with me and you don't agree with the way we've interpreted the buffer zones, we have the right to ask you to agree with us that we've overcome the presumptions concerning resource area buffers. You adopted the regulations 2003, 2008, and you revised it in 2011. And you say that the reason you have buffers is that you want to have you want to prevent adverse impacts to resource area buffer zones. And the values you're trying to protect are the protection of public and private water supply, groundwater, flood control, erosion, sediment control, storm damage prevention, water pollution control, fisheries, shellfish, wildlife habitat, agriculture, aesthetics, recreation, and agriculture. Then I talk about how I quoted the regulations about how to overcome presumptions. So what I then talk about, that in your whole introduction, where you talk about the resource area buffers, you always talk in the introduction how these are very important for wetlands. Later you change it from wetlands to resource area. So a coastal bank's not a wetland, but it obviously is a resource area. It's an elevated landform that lies at the landward edge of coastal storm flowage. Here we have a slope that's greater than 1 to 10 for a portion of the lot. I should have made that a little darker, but this is the coastal bank that's on this lot. It goes down to the dune. So we say that out of all of the values that you talked about, we believe that we can eliminate everything except flood control, erosion and sediment control, and storm damage prevention. The only other one that might apply is wildlife habitat. So we assert that because of the activities here, that we're not altering this, that we will not affect the ability of the bank to erode. We don't think that it's any activity up here would affect the land subject to coastal storm flowage, and we don't think it would affect storm damage prevention. So we also then talked about what could we do on that coastal bank under your regulations. So in your this is a blow-up of an exhibit, and what I did was I examined FWR 1030, which is the performance standards of a coastal bank. I believe under your regulations we cannot do any work in here. I believe that we could propose work in here and it could be permitted subject to conditions. So my point is, if we can do work here, and we could have applied to do some work here, why do we need to have a resource area buffer landward of that, since theoretically this could be altered? So I think that that alone is a good enough reason to say that we've overcome the presumptions. The other point that we should be focused on is this is an aerial photograph that goes from Langley Road, and these are all the developed lots all the way around to number 91. So we go from 32 around to 91. The only vacant lot is lot 57. And my point is that it's not fair to this landowner to somehow impose conditions on him that takes away his ability to develop land because of this resource area protection. The other thing I talked about was wildlife habitat. I have a recent job on the north side of the Bourne Bridge. When you go up 25 in the woods, on the right, there's a chain link fence, and that's supposed to keep out animals from going into the superhighway. There's a high-pressure gas line there, and there's a fence on the other side of that. So it'd be almost as wide as our bike path where it's fenced at the Great St. Marsh. There's fences on both sides. I had a job where we were surveying a big piece up there, and I have this big rugged instrument man, and the long and short of it, the chief set up the gun, and the instrument man walked out this clearing between the two fences, and there was some turkeys, so he made himself big and yelled, and the turkeys, at least one of the turkeys turned and attacked him. So we didn't have turkeys here not that long ago, and so I have discussed how we have more wildlife habitat now than we have greater population of most mammals, greater population of about 60% of the birds than we did 30 years ago. A little while ago, I encountered a group of turkeys at Jones Road and Gifford Street Lights. At my own house, I encountered a herd of 9 deer in the last 60 days. We've had coyotes come to the Cape. We've had a fisher cat come to the Cape. I've seen more wildlife now than I ever remember. When I was a little boy, I sat on my grandfather's floor in Lancaster, Mass, reading with horror about how raccoons were coming up. So we actually have more wildlife habitat because what we've actually done in this town especially is we've purchased about 23% of the developable land and set it aside for open space, not counting the land that's subject to, not including privately owned open space, not including the land around our wells and land around the reservoir. It does include the Crane Wildlife Area or the Washburn Island. So we have set aside a significant amount of land for wildlife habitat. It seems completely unfair to say to this last man that somehow he needs this buffer for wildlife habitat. It's extremely dense vegetation. It's on soils that are not going to easily erode. So I also did change the plan as we discussed, or as I promised you. The issue was raised that it appeared that I was diverting runoff into Gunning Point Road, and it looked like runoff would reach the abutter. So what I did is highlight in yellow the changes, and what we did was we have a paved driveway. We created a low point here. We show pitches and pitch. There's then a bituminous concrete waterway that goes down into a stone line swale, and then this is a grass swale, and I drew a diagram to show that this runoff will be diverted past this developed lot. So I believe that that answers the question in that the runoff will not reach Gunning Point Avenue. And I believe that then I've answered the issues that I was asked to answer. Before I turn it over to Brian Mann to talk about wildlife habitat, is there anything specifically about my testimony that you would have any questions on?
I'll have questions later on. I want
All
to
right.
hear your whole presentation.
Brian Madden, wildlife scientist at LEC Environmental. We were asked to take a look at the property and evaluate its habitat perspective. Related to coastal banks, as wildlife habitat may be protected locally under the bylaw. As you can see, and as Mike had alluded to, this is more or less the last developed lot within a moderately developed residential subdivision. Most of the properties you see do extend down to the water's edge and either have armored seawalls or riprap, things along that nature. This parcel itself is wedged in between two well-developed properties to the north and south. There's existing developed conditions immediately opposite of Gunning Point Ave. A lot of those properties have somewhat maintained manicured lawn conditions with some scattered mature trees surrounding. A pretty fragmented area, not a lot of habitat connectivity, continuity. The footprint itself for the proposed work is essentially consolidated within a 100 by 100 square foot area. Immediately abutting Gunning Point Avenue and in line with the two properties that are developed to the north and south. Property will maintain about 120 by 120 foot undeveloped area that's currently all vegetated, mostly by native species. There are some invasives in there. But all well-established vegetation, aside from that earthen path that goes down to the dune beach area. But the work itself is consolidated. Within that footprint, there are no unique wildlife habitat features or any significant natural communities in that area. Any potential migration corridors or movement areas on the property or through the property will be maintained by that 100 by 120 by 120 foot area. And based on our evaluation, we didn't feel that the proposed work would materially impair the coastal bank's ability to provide wildlife habitat functions. So I guess I'll just turn it over to Attorney Wall.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney with an office in Sandwich, and I represent the applicant in this matter. I have 3 points that I want to make that are of a legal nature. The first one has to do with the buffer zone. And as Mr. McGrath said, the last time that we were here, the commission questioned whether or not the buffer zone should be drawn with parallel lines headed landward or whether it should go out in a radial arc. And he made his case as to why he thinks that we've drawn it appropriately. What I would like to do is point out what the definition says and how that would be interpreted by the courts. Your definitions say that buffer zones extend horizontally in a landward direction. Under an interpretation that a court would apply, the first thing that courts do when they look at regulations and laws is to apply what's called the plain meaning rule, that the court looks at the very plain meaning of the words that you use when you write your regulations. And so I think the operative words in this case are horizontal and landward. If one were to, and this is in Mr. McGrath's memorandum, if one were to draw the buffer radially, if you could imagine walking up the bank, if you were walking landward, you would walk towards the road, just as we've drawn it. If it's drawn radially, in order to get to that farthest point on the radius, if that's the right term, you would have to walk up to the bank and make an immediate 90-degree turn and then walk parallel along the delineation, which would not be landward. And so we would submit to you that drawing the buffer zone in a radial fashion is not consistent with the plain meaning of your own regulation, and that landward means landward, which is how we've drawn the buffer. The second point that I would like to make has to do with our contention that we've overcome the presumptions. And you've heard the evidence as to why we think we have What I would like to focus you on is what we are required to do in order to overcome the presumption. And what it says is, it says that presumptions of significance may be overcome by what's called preponderance of the evidence. And I know that your town council has talked to you about that, so I'm not going to lecture you about it. But what it simply means is that we must show that it's more likely than not. We don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt or with what sometimes is called clear and convincing evidence. It's called by preponderance of the evidence. And we lawyers sometimes say that probable cause means 33% and beyond a reasonable doubt means 99%. Sometimes we say preponderance by the evidence says 51%. And so we would submit to you that the evidence that we've given by Mr. McGrath, by Mr. Madden, and there's also a letter in your file from LEC that's authored by Mr. Madden and Stan Humphreys, who's a coastal geologist. And the evidence that we've given with respect to the role that the land at issue plays relative to the coastal bank, we think we've met that standard of preponderance of the evidence that it is not significant. The last point that I'd like to make has to do with the velocity zone. There was a question as to how the line was arrived at, and Mr. McGrath, who is the PLS and PE on the team, explained how that line was drawn. I'd like to focus my comments on the 25-foot presumption. In 10.38 2B3, your regulations state that the Falmouth, you essentially create a presumption that you add 25 feet to the firm line. And what I would submit very respectfully to you is that sometimes familiarity with your regulations sometimes leads to imprecise conclusions. I've practiced before you for many years, and I very often hear the term thrown about the Falmouth V zone, as if there's a separate and a distinct Falmouth V zone that's different than the firm zone. And in fact, if you looked at your regulation very carefully, what it simply says is that in Falmouth, the V zone is presumed to be 25 feet landward of the firm line. There's not an additional zone that's created. It's just another presumption. And what I would submit to you is that we are entitled to overcome that presumption, again, by preponderance of the evidence that the FEMA line that we've shown on our plan is accurate. And all the evidence that Mr. McGrath gave to you about the topographical maps and the manner in which he drew the line, we submit to you is by preponderance of the evidence that that line is accurate, and therefore we do not need to presume to add 25 feet more landward. And that's my presentation. We would submit to you that the project is permittable as proposed, and we would ask you to issue an order of conditions, and we're available for any questions.
Thanks, Brian. I'll come back. One question you had, I'll cover, that I know you have.
Yeah.
Well, you're not on the quorum. Mario.
Mr. Madden, could you step to the podium, please? I've read your report and I've read Mike's wildlife habitat report. Let me get this straight. You're saying because Gunning Point is completely developed except for this one lot, that essentially this wooded lot has no wildlife value?
No, it has diminished value, certainly based on its habitat context.
I didn't hear that one.
It certainly has diminished habitat value based on its context and surrounding areas.
Okay. Why wouldn't this be an enclave for local wildlife? I mean, it's really the only naturally vegetated lot in Gunning Point. Does it not follow that wildlife would utilize the only wooded lot in Gunning Point?
Sure, and they still would have the opportunity to do so with the development itself, excluding basically every area, all the more terrestrial landward of the coastal dune. The development footprint itself represents about 40% of that area. So I mean, you're having basically a 120-foot area that will remain to function as wildlife habitat.
I know there's a lot more coyotes and turkeys and raccoons, but those are opportunistic species.
Correct.
What about songbird populations? What's happened to them in the last few years?
You know, they've diminished based on primarily loss of grassland habitat. That's a primary motivating.
seems to me this is pretty good songbird habitat, warblers, perhaps tanagers, and their numbers are drastically down. So we're not talking coyotes and turkeys here, we're
Yep.
talking about
Full spectrum, sure.
some pretty special species here. I'm not saying that I'm gonna vote against the project, but I'm wondering if there's a way we can condition this so that there's no future development of that coastal bank. It's very heavily vegetated. You know, I just throw that out.
That's going to be entirely up to this board.
Mhm. That's all I have to say.
That's something we can discuss. Although, since you brought that up, it's interesting that you say there's no corridor, and in fact, right across from it, there's a corridor that goes into a big patch of,
Yeah, I mean, basically, as you can kind of see here, these trees right here, there's all lawn conditions underneath that. Basically, you have a maybe 20-foot wide strip, mostly all blackberry that connects up to that area. I mean, I would predict that any of your typical migration corridors are along these pre-established development conditions, the roadways, driveways, the shoreline itself. Not so much
depending on the species.
Yes, exactly.
Mike?
I think I have the information to make a decision.
Okay?
The argument is, if you could stay with me for a minute. No development is better than any development. Is a standard. Is there any?
From a wildlife
Yeah,
habitat perspective.
exactly. Is putting in that a half a house do more harm than a full house? Does no house? I mean, if there's a standard that we're going to hold this to is no development,
Yep.
anything you do makes it worse, then you're stuck. But I'm not personally sure that's true, and I'm looking for some help.
You're gonna take down a whole grove of old trees there that's in the bank, that entire buffer to the bank, and I'll get to discuss that with Mike in a minute, is gonna be clear cut. Everything up to the coastal bank is clear cut. So, just to give you an example, I remember years ago, I used to go play soccer in a soccer league up in Plymouth, and we used to go by this beautiful swatch of forest. And then all of a sudden, you saw the forest start disappearing, and off Route 5, that big mall that was put in. And the fact is, anytime you clear land like that, it doesn't mean the animals are gonna move somewhere else. It means there's no space for those animals anymore. So we can discuss it, but a half a house does less damage than a whole house, but either does more damage than no house. As far
Well,
as
if that's-
wildlife,
if-
as far as
if
wildlife
that's the
goes.
argument, that's fine.
Could I make a comment about the conversation that I think Mr. DiGregorio started and Mr. Powers has continued? I think it's important to focus on the question. So the question isn't whether or not the clearing of some trees in the upland portion of the lot is going to have an impact. It probably will. I won't deny that it will. The question is whether we've overcome the presumption that that buffer zone plays in protection of the bank's ability to provide habitat. And so that's the argument, that by doing what we're doing in the area away from the bank, we are not having an adverse effect on the bank's ability to provide habitat value.
No, but there's also habitat value in the buffer itself. The buffer is a resource.
But the presumption that we're seeking to overcome is as to the resource buffer to the bank.
Yeah, but the resource buffer to the bank is a resource.
Right.
One of the functions of that resource is wildlife habitat.
Right.
I'm not talking about the bank's function. I'm talking about the function of a buffer to the bank. One of the functions of all buffers, of all vegetated buffers, is wildlife habitat.
Right.
Plus, takes nutrients, takes pollutants, takes excess water, et cetera.
Okay, I've made my point.
Mike? Any other questions?
No,
Could I just comment on the way this discussion's going? If you go to SK3 and SK4, we separate them, flip it over like this. On the south side of Gunning Point Road is the Flume Pond piece that's open space. It's a very significant parcel. If you look across the opposite side of Sipworset Road, in the back is BB Acres. So there's very substantial open space nearby, very substantial open space. If you were to go up to, and go up, basically, if you go up Standish Avenue, there's a connection to BB's Acres. So there's an enormous amount of open land nearby. I still say it's unfair to say this family has to give up
Mike,
their
you've had that argument. We're asking questions now. Tom?
Wonderful reading. Makes the highlight of my week to digest all these things. I don't know if we recall Mario. I had called, Mario was a mentor for me the first time I sat on this board. And one of the first projects that I had him advise me on was number 7 and number 67 with the green corridor, the green courtyard between the two properties. And one of the things that I did was I had him stand on one side, and I walked all the way to the other side, and I jumped and waved my arms through all the pucker brush and all that happiness. And I yelled to him, I said, now everything in between me is gone. Everything is gone. It's all gone. It's going to be disturbed, and it's not going to look like anything for quite some time. And that project went through. Did it affect the wildlife in that area? Most certainly did. Along with 91, 83, 77, 73, 65, 61, 55, 51, 47, 45, 43, 39, 35, 31, 32, and on. There is impact by all of these properties, none of which are being held to the standard that we are doing right now. We are sensitive to interpretations and legalese far more than I ever thought I would have to as a volunteer. This weighs heavily on me sometimes because I have my own personal opinions and the regulations. And when there's compelling testimony to different views, and I have to decipher that, and that's what we will do on this. A wildlife corridor, Falmouth is one of the few that we have mapped wildlife corridors. It's not too far from here. I saw my first otter, and it was crossing Sipworset Road. And so there's not just, as Mario made mention, and if I offend anybody, I'm sorry, the nuisance wildlife as in raccoons and coyotes, which I can't stand, and, things like that, they are opportunity, they know when trash day is. They're gonna be there before you get your barrel out. The function of this, we have discussions of that many times. The FEMA, the velocity zone, that FEMA line has made it in the newspaper and on the radio lately as well. It's always something that is, I'm digesting. To read this was a lot of fun. I don't see, the testimony we have here tonight, I think is going to be enough for us to have our deliberations, because we're pretty full. The applicant has given complete packets, and the rest is going to be up to us. Thank you.
Almost complete packets.
Almost. Well, I'm gonna say, just, your turn.
Tommy?
No questions, I've heard enough.
Okay, I have some questions. The first is, Mike, how many coastal banks are on this property?
The plan shows one coastal bank.
One coastal bank. And we do, as Brian, as you know, we do routinely show where the Falmouth wetlands velocity zone is. But even if we didn't, the one coastal bank that is on this lot is in a velocity zone. But I would say the velocity zone extends across the whole coastal bank because we don't distinguish between the Falmouth velocity zone and the velocity zone in our regulations. And so that, in fact, 10.185A3D, this falls into the non-eroding coastal bank in a velocity zone. A non-eroding coastal bank in a velocity zone has a 50-foot buffer. 50-foot A buffer. It has a 100-foot buffer. It has a 50-foot A buffer. So I have a problem. I have a couple of problems. One is you don't show any A buffer to the coastal bank on the entire lot. The second is, even if I were to agree, which I don't agree, that part of it didn't have a 50-foot buffer, it would still have a B buffer, in which case every tree in the buffer zone should be identified, and there should be compensation for any trees that are cut down within the buffer zone. And I agree with you, Mario, that this is an area that would be good for songbirds, for orioles, for tanagers, for owls. And none of that's reflected. I also don't notice a back lot line on this. You notified SPABS, which has the lot 0, and it's shown on this little map you have in the corner. You show it a back lot line, but you don't show it on this map.
You've asked two questions. I'll answer the second question first. My interpretation is that there is a line right here, and on this side, I've written right away. And my interpretation of the original deed that was conveyed, the title was conveyed down to mean high water, subject to a right-of-way. So that's what the plan shows. That's my interpretation. And I don't need to remind the commission, you don't need to worry yourselves about rights of way. And what the regulation says that I notify everybody that's on the tax list, so I did notify people appropriately.
Madam Chairman, is Salt Pond or Bird Sanctuaries paying taxes on that land?
I don't know, did not-for-profits have to pay taxes?
That has nothing to do with this.
Could I just add, I think Mike McGrath answered the question very clearly, but I think if I could answer it in a more simple way. The rear property line on this property is the line of the water, because the deed says by the beach. And there's a whole body of case law that says that if a deed goes to by the water's edge or the water, then one owns to the low water mark. But if it goes to a landward reference, then you own to the high water mark. And this deed says by the beach. So we believe that our client owns the beach in this case, as Mr. McGrath said, subject to certain rights of way to walk back and forth across it. So that's where the property line is.
Okay, and I also want to put into the record a couple of pictures. Well, one is, Mike, I just want to put this in, which is from our bylaw, which is the jurisdiction, which is all regulated resources have 100-foot buffer areas to them. And then a couple of pictures from Ms. Adams, taken in the 1938 hurricane from the western or northern part of Gunning Point. This is Hurricane Carol, and this shows the track of Hurricane Carol, which shows that it was about, the center went about 80 miles west of Falmouth. And then I realize that you're submitting this under the old FEMA regs, but I'm just going to put the new FEMA map in here, in the record as well. And I just want to mention, and this is sort of in general for all the projects that we've had tonight, we've had discussion that these people are or are not good stewards of the land, but I just want to remind everybody on the board that our job is to look at what's proposed and what impact that will have on the environment and who's applying for the project, who might be living in the project next year. None of us have any idea who will be living in the project 20 years or 50 years from now. So although it might be of interest, it's not pertinent to the discussion. And that's all. Yeah, Jen.
Madam Chairman, just a few comments from the staff. On the plan, this board always asks that all resource areas and setbacks be placed on a plan. This is a coastal bank in a velocity zone. It is a 40 to 50-foot buffer from the top of that bank under your regulations. It should be on the plan. I believe Commissioner West at the time asked for the trees to be put on the plan. And that said, then the board makes the determination of whether or not the applicant has overcome the presumptions. And those presumptions under land subject to coastal storm flowage presumptions are rebuttable and may be overcome upon a clear showing that this area does not play a role in the protection of those resource areas. So that's a very large hurdle to overcome. So this plan is not complete in the way that you require the plans to be submitted to you. So, and that's all for right now.
Well, I stand by my narrative under wetland resource areas that breaks the coastal bank down into certain areas. There's an area that touches the coastal dune. There's an area that's separated by land subject to coastal storm flowage. And we had a discussion with the staff prior to the previous hearing, and they agreed with us at that time that we determined these appropriately, and we believe there's no resource area buffer on a greater, almost that entire portion lot, because it does not physically touch that velocity zone. And so I stand
What about the
by the
isolated
narrative
freshwater
that I
wetland
have.
on the other property line?
Excuse me. I stand by the narrative that's here. I think that I've determined it appropriately. I do not recall in my notes anything about locating the trees. I'm sorry, if you wanted me to locate the trees, I missed that. I have notes, but it doesn't talk about locating trees.
Mike, is that bank also adjacent to an isolated freshwater wetland?
There's an isolated freshwater wetland on the next lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We show the resource area buffer for that.
That's not what I asked. I asked if your coastal bank was adjacent to the isolated freshwater wetland.
And the answer was yes. Are there any other questions on the board? Should we,
The board has to decide whether or not you want the trees on the plan. Or if you guys have enough information where you can make your decision, it's completely up to you guys.
I personally believe that we have a plan that has provided by a professional engineer and a surveyor who expresses his opinion, and that is, we can interpret it as to the regulations as we see fit, but we have the information that's necessary.
and that if we chose to do this, there would be conditions that
Yes.
would have to show where the trees are and what compensation
Yes.
there would need to be.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
I move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second. Okay. Now I'll open it up for questions from the audience. Mike, you're going to get up before I even call on you?
Call me, were you? Madam Chairman, Mike Leader, apologies, I have quite a head cold, so I may be worse than I usually am. You began in one of your previous years talking about precedent, and I'm very concerned about the precedent here that's being discussed. The applicant has claimed that they own True High Tide. And I want to say that the board has consistently, and I agree with the board, they should not get into private property issues. So to that end, I point out some facts. The assessor does not show them, shows them having a back line, does not own them. I talked to the assessor today. They are not being taxed on this beach parcel, and they're not showing them as owners of that beach parcel. As the board is aware, the assessor's maps are what are used to notify people and tell people. So the assessor's is what guides you. And in my view, this board, when they have a conflict, what the assessor says the property owner is, and when an applicant coming before you says it is, you should simply say you need to clear that up before we can understand this, because.
You know what, Mike?
Yep.
We're going to make a finding that its property line is not on the map, that there's a dispute.
Well, let me just complete my train of thought then for you, because I'm going to provide some detail for you for your record, for help your finding. So they are currently showing this parcel as being something over 28,000 feet. The actual deed for this parcel claims it is only 26,000 feet, 600. So they've added more than 10%, and I point out that's important both from an environmental as well as our regulations in town, because it's the impact of the structure that will be on the total lot. I also point out that a couple of years ago, the same issue came before this board. We talked to this board, and the attorney who's here today, Attorney Wall, for a few houses down, claimed his client did not own the beach. The beach was owned by Langley Keys. He provided you with a detailed title search showing that ownership and showing it was owned by Langley Keys. I remind this board you asked him directly, in his opinion, who owned the whole beach, and he claimed Langley Keys. Langley Keys has deeded, and I will read you the text there, his entire ownership of the beach, shore, and flats along Buzzards Bay to Salt Pond Bird Sanctuaries. And I point out that, and I'm going to put these in the record, that you have here the attorney showing his client, who was 3 houses down, not owning the beach. He's done a title search. I would say it's up to this board to say to him, explain why this search and explanation to Langley Keys was the owner of the beach is different than this situation. I think before you close that, they should provide proof, given that the assessor is not showing that they don't own it and the parcel is too small. I also would point out.
We will put this in the record, but you want to give it to us?
Is it correct, Mr. McGrath, you're a member of the board of SPASI? Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuaries? Is that correct?
Mike, is this testimony for us, or are you going
This
to build
is,
it?
yes, it's important for you, yes, because SPASI has
Mike,
registered a plan
It
showing their ownership of the beach.
it doesn't directly impact what our decision on this.
I think it does,
Project
because
is.
if the parcel is considerably smaller, then their ability to mitigate, their impact on the parcel is different, and that's why it's
Well, we
essential.
Duly noted, Mike.
Okay. Well, your job is to identify the owner. That's required of this thing. You are supposed to do that. You note that. You have to get certified. If there's a question of ownership, Mr. McGrath has in previous hearings, since it's a question of ownership, the board should not hear this matter. The assessor does not show them as owning what they're showing they're owning. And the precedent, what will happen, I could come before you now and say, I own something, and you're not gonna look it up.
Mike?
There is some due diligence there.
And I appreciate your passion with this, and I duly noted. I can't tell you any more factually. Thank you for the information. Please put it in the record.
Okay?
I'm not gonna, we have a
Mike, if you
full
just give
goblet
me the
here.
information, I'll put it in the record for you.
So this is the title search by Mr.
Yep.
Walsh showing not the owner. This is the deed from Langley Keys showing the ownership. And this is the parcel, the building's parcel showing their ownership and their back, clearly identified the back
And we
lot line.
also have Mr. Attorney Wall's testimony from today. Thank you.
Right. Can I ask, if the hearing's not being closed, is it important to have?
They have a motion on the floor.
Is it also important to have the Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuary's plan showing their ownership, as well as the plan of reference in the deed, which clearly states they do not own to the beach?
I think you're being redundant and repetitive with it. I don't think that you need
Mike,
any
just-
more than 2 shotgun barrels blowing at us,
Okay.
okay?
Well-
It's in the minutes. If this goes any further, we're gonna be required to find that plan to put it in our administrative record. Mike, you've mentioned it, so it's in the record. If I don't have the physical copy, we will get it.
Sir?
My name is Michel O'Hayen. I'm the neighbor 61. When I built my property, it was an existing house. The property was not, there was no trees whatsoever that were taken. And I believe the property on the other side was an old property Mr. Carrier had for 50 years, and when he built an addition, there was no, I mean, everything was stayed intact. This property is awfully small, and I don't know who the buyer is, and maybe I'm entitled to know who the buyer is and what's the purpose of this. Maybe that's not your, it's part of your job, but I believe that, you know, the dwelling that is being planned on this property is enormous to the property. And don't be fooled, but 60% of all the trees will be gone. The only thing that's not going to be gone is the vegetation which is close to the coastal bank. So everything will be destroyed because it's a very, very narrow property. In addition, I'm not very familiar with the coastal bank, the Falmouth line, and and when I built my lot, I had to have a permission from FEMA on certain things. I don't remember what it was, but FEMA had to approve. And I'm in the process of contacting a coastal engineer, which I have not been able to line up yet because I was away on a family business overseas, and I just got back. And I don't know what, I quite don't understand the technicality of what's going to happen now, but I will kindly ask you, whatever happens tonight, and I don't know what it is, that a decision not be made until I have my FEMA, quote, unquote, coastal engineer that's going to comment on such an important subject. Thank you.
Okay, sir, I'll just tell you what's going to happen. We're going to close this hearing, and we're going to take a vote within 2 weeks on it. I mean, you were here a month ago. You knew we were going to have this project. If you still, and then 2 things can happen. We'll either accept it or we'll deny it. If we accept it, then you have an opportunity. How many days is it, Jen?
10 days under the state, I believe 60 days under the bylaw.
Brian, is it
Brian,
60 days under the bylaw?
It's
Sorry, I was not.
60 days under the bylaw?
to an appeal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 60, not.
So you still have a period where you could appeal the decision?
Oh, I see. So the decision is not being made today, right?
Well, no, it's not being made today, but it'll be made within 2 weeks.
And
Madam
how
Chairman.
would, how
And if
does,
you don't agree with the decision, if you get someone and you say, well, I don't agree with this decision, then you have 10 days to file. 10 days after the decision, you can file with the state, and then 60 days?
Yes.
60 days, you file with Superior Court.
Mr. O'Hayan, but the board cannot take any additional information after they close the hearing. So any report that you get from an engineer, or anything like that, this board cannot look at.
So when are you going to close the hearing? That's my question.
They put a
Well,
motion on the
we have a
floor to
motion on
close
the
it
table to
tonight.
close it tonight.
They cannot continue the hearing without the applicant's consent.
Well, I'm asking the applicant to consent, because I don't think this is such a, this is not, you know, I am not going to allow.
Yeah, they're under no obligation to keep it open.
It's my recollection that they went to the 30th so that you could respond in kind. You had explained, that this is my recollection, that you had business overseas, family things, and that they didn't take an immediate continuance. They afforded you, allotted you a time, and you knew that this was the day that the hearing was, because you were here that evening.
Right.
So,
But I didn't
unfortunately-
understand,
I'm
I don't
sorry that you
understand the
didn't
process.
understand. We tried the best we could to inform you,
Yeah.
and that you knew that if you wanted to respond to this in a timely fashion, there's a lot of communication that can be accomplished. Unfortunately,
So what are you telling? You're telling me on one hand that in 2 weeks you're going to make a decision,
yes.
and the other hand you're telling me that you're not going to listen to any argument I'm going to bring.
When there is-
No, we make a decision. Then, if the decision is no, then maybe you're like, well, okay, that's what I wanted. If the decision is yes, they can go ahead and build, then you have a decision to make as to whether you want to appeal our decision.
I see, but what you're telling me is that you're not going to allow me to have a witness expert to come and present before you.
That's
Yes.
correct.
That's what you're telling me.
That's
Yes.
correct. If you wanted to have an expert, it should have been tonight.
Well, I didn't understand that.
Okay.
So, I'm an honest citizen. I pay taxes like all of you, so I did not understand that. If had I understood that, I'm also a businessman, I understand a lot of things. Had I understood that, I would have had my witness tonight. But obviously, I did not understand that.
My recollection of the hearing prior is when we continued this, when the applicant made the motion to continue, we explained to you that that was when you should have your expert witness. You had said that that was your time period to take care of family business and to allow.
I did not understand that. I did not understand. Okay.
Now, your next recourse is, there's a motion on the table to close this.
Yeah.
The hearing will be closed. Not only yourself, but anybody else that's here cannot put any more information in. That's it. The file is closed. We then go and we have our discussion and we vote on it. Whether it's a yay or nay, I don't know. If it is a yay and you want to appeal it, you have a time to do it with the state and you have a time to do it underneath the town bylaw. You are afforded that. All your information, then it's a different level of.
I know, but, you know, to go to a hearing with the states is very different to go to the town where I live, obviously, right? I mean, I'm not giving up an opportunity to
Madam
bring.
Chairman, I think right now, he's being so redundant and his comments are irrelevant. And I think he's had enough mic time.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I make one brief point, please?
One brief
I
comment.
promise it'll be brief. So, the motion before you is to close the hearing. I point out that this board has asked for additional information that they think is missing and incomplete. I've pointed out that there's questions about whether the lot lines are shown properly, the lot size is correct, the record is missing considerable information. I think under that circumstance, the board should ask the applicant to clarify these things that you've requested, and we've pointed out and requested.
The applicant knows.
Point of order. I'm a registered
Wait a
professional
second,
land
Mike.
surveyor, and I
Mike.
testified how
Mike.
I determined the boundary. He's not a surveyor.
Mike, the applicant is sitting there, they're listening. If
Right.
they wanted to ask a continuance, they know that this is the time to get up to ask for a continuance.
Okay, I would
It's
just.
their
right, I
opportunity.
just would make the point that there is significant information missing, and you have a right to deny an application because you're missing important information.
The board understands
And
that,
right,
Mike. and-
okay. I mean, I've served on a
No,
conscom
I
before,
understand.
and I've had plenty of attorneys look at this deed.
Mike.
As I point out, Mr. McGrath is on the board of Salt Pond. He's aware Salt Pond is registered ownership of
Madam
this.
Chair, I call for the
So,
vote.
I just want to
I
make the point.
want to point out that I took no part
Mike,
whatsoever
Mike.
in the deliberations of Salt Pond.
Mike,
Could I make two very brief points? And I
be
understand.
If it's
very,
new, if it's new.
if it's
we-
new.
It's-
If we heard the
it's-
word.
It's to rebut some personal things that were said. First of all, the date, Mr. Corvo is correct. We wanted a continuance to the last
We
hearing.
remember that
Yeah.
till the 30th, but.
And my client changed significant business plans to be
Right,
here.
we remember that.
Okay. The second thing is, as Mr. McGrath said, we believe the property lines on this are correct. Mr. Eder has brought up some materials that I submitted in another case. It's apples and oranges, and I'm not going to argue the whole case, but very simply put, the issue in that other case was the client I was representing, the lot clearly did not get to the water, and there was a clear question as to ownership of the beach, and the client was proposing work on the beach. And so therefore, as Mr. Eder correctly points out, the applicant must demonstrate to you that they either are the owner or have some ownership interest
To actually do work on that property,
And
on that part of the property.
Right. And the material in that case, we submitted an affidavit from Mr. Keys indicating that there was an ownership interest, that he had granted permission. This deed is different. This deed says by the sea, and as I already indicated, I'm sorry, by the beach.
Bounded by the deed.
Bounded by the beach, and there are.
Listen, we will make a finding.
And I am not a
We
professional
will
land
make
surveyor.
a condition.
But I am,
If it's a-
right. I'm simply testifying, there's a large body of case law that conveyancers that write these words, they're words of art. And if it says by the water, you get to the low water mark. If it says by the beach, you get to the high water mark. The property line's the high water mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Mike,
No,
No more.
no,
No more.
Mike,
I'm calling for the
Let me
vote.
just make a very
All,
quick point.
no, Mike,
That's it.
all in
I
favor?
would ask permission to submit to the record that there is case law that says when you say bounded by the beach.
Mike?
No, no,
We're
not
having
on,
a-
not
Well,
on.
so why can't you allow me to
Mike.
submit that to the record? And just
Because it
leave-
has nothing to do with what we're
Well,
going to
he's
be voting on.
misrepresenting that the property owns the water, and I can show you the case law that says it's absolutely not true.
That has nothing, zero to do with what our decision environmentally is going to be done. I'm done.
You're wrong, though. You have to show the property lines and you have to show the proper lot size.
We're
You're
gonna have
wrong.
We're going to have a finding.
I mean, Tom, there's a motion and a second on the table to,
any more comment?
what?
Anybody else out there?
Well, I will in a second. I'm
Okay.
just going to say what it
Say
is.
one more, but not repeating myself, and I say one more thing.
You have to do it from the podium, please.
Okay. Again, I confess that I'm very ignorant about the technicalities about, but I think Jennifer mentioned that something is missing before, about the coastal line, about 450 feet or whatever.
Sir, Jennifer is a valued
I know what-
administrator.
Huh?
Jennifer is a valued administrator. She is not a commissioner.
Okay,
There's a vote to be taken by the commission. There's a motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under
well, it
advisement.
looks to me that, you're ignoring something very important that she mentions, and, that's basically, that's why.
Before I take this vote, anybody who hasn't said anything from the audience, anybody who
Mike.
hasn't,
Said
I don't wanna hear it,
Mr.
Mike.
McGrath.
I want to make sure you know that there's a letter from the buildings and a letter from
got
Mr.
that.
Carey
We
in
got
your
it.
file.
We got it,
Yes,
Mike.
yes, we
Have that,
did.
Mike, thank you.
Okay, motion and a second on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Is this yours?
Mike,
Yours?
Mike, Mr. McGrath, that right there on the bottom, could you
We still have business to do, ladies and gentlemen, so if there's any discussion, please take it in the hall. Thank you.
In the far hall.
Fire hall, thank you.
I'd suggest the quarter deck.
Right now? Oh, yeah. For us? I'd love to go there right now.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Guess we just missed 3 innings of the Red
You know,
Sox.
on these things, at times that we deserve, has duties.
Jen, are you getting all of these?
Yes,
Because
that's
I think
what
we
I'm
should
talking,
have these for
that's what I'm
deliberation.
discussing with Mr. McGrath, and he's gonna be nice enough to dismantle his board for me.
You have copies of all of them.
Yeah, we have copies of all this. I just double
All right.
checked, he's gonna do it,
This is the only one you don't have copies.
All right,
Mike's
thanks.
gonna deal with that, and then we're gonna vote orders of conditions, and then you are all gonna go home.
Vote orders of conditions. 15 Pine Bank Road, North Falmouth, Michael and Susan Klein.
Quorum.
We're gonna form that. Hang on.
While you're getting.
I put them down here. Mario, Mike, Tom, and Courtney. Thank you, Mike. This is the raise and rebuild,
Yes.
Pine Bank Barbara's project.
Yep.
The only concern that the staff has in this case is just, and I know that, Tom, you share this, and probably all of you do, is the amount of work that's going to be done down on Pine Bank during these projects. Sorry, Mario, I just need to sit down. I don't think
Okay.
there's any special conditions other than, I know on the Royal, you had mentioned, well, you're gonna do Royal McGanset at the, later, but you had mentioned possibly sending a letter to all of the property owners that are going to be doing work, letting them know that, you know, site management is gonna be important in these cases, and that's the one that's being built on the Crowley's property, the McGanset, the one we had where the, I don't remember the property owner's name, the stormwater underneath the house. I got it, Madam Chairman.
I'll get it.
She will.
They'll both get it.
They're both gonna get it.
I could be home once.
I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah.
Score is you don't wanna know,
I've never seen this board
4-0.
acting
They got
Well,
second
as,
inning.
for the sake of keeping the ball rolling here, on this project, it seemed pretty straightforward.
in motion.
We had the only concerns that we had was, management between McGanset and the other 3 projects that are on this really congested area. I think if Jen has any special conditions, they'd be minor, and when she comes back in, if she has anything to contribute to that, then I would like to make a motion. But I think everybody is cognizant of the sensitivity of the neighborhood here, and coordination between projects is gonna be paramount.
Can we write that into the order of conditions for each one of these properties?
I'm sorry?
Can we write in the coordination issue in each one of these?
I think it's
properties?
recognized because they have a common engineer, and I think that conduit is already open, both with the community liaison
Sorry, Madam
that they had. And I was just trying to keep the ball rolling, Jen.
Thank you, Tom.
If there are any special conditions,
Only the site management one is gonna be big, and we did talk during the Royal McGanset, which was heard the same night as this, as sending a letter to all of them, including Jack Lander's colleagues. Jack has 1, Barbara has 3.
right,
In that general area, and just sending them a letter, letting them know, you know, this is happening, it's gonna be happening in a short time period, and everybody should be aware of that. I know there's a contractor looking for this particular order, so I don't know who is going to begin before.
Right.
Yeah, but also it's the question you brought up earlier, when you have a lot of different contractors coming in working at once.
yeah.
So here you have a lot of different contractors working on 4 different projects.
Now, I
Yeah.
have a question, weren't we told that McGanset was gonna be done before this one?
It'd have to be because of
Because they have to get into the backyard.
they're using this as the access, that's part of the access.
Okay.
Through where they're taking the house down, right?
Right, well, through the side yard. Coming in through here, and then this one, I just had a better, yeah, I know, there was a better picture of it. Yeah, there is a certain portion of it that you're using what riverway or the dirt right-of-way over there. And then yeah,
And then
that's
they
the
have to
biggest
get in
one.
these backyards.
Yes.
They have to get in all these
Yep,
backyards.
all the way across laterally or parallel to the base of the other project. But this one, I'd like to make a motion to accept the order as discussed, with the letters being appropriately sent to
Yeah.
all the other
Okay.
players in the area at that time.
Jen, I think it's, in that letter, it's, the stability of that slope is the driving environmental concern, and that, I don't know how you phrase it, but preference to work on that slope would be appreciated. I mean,
You get
in
the,
the-
get the slope stabilized
Yeah,
first,
you know, if
before you build
No,
anything
I
underneath it.
understand, I understand that.
It's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Okay, I heard a motion, did I not?
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
Motion, a second on the table. All in favor of the motion, the second on the table, which is to approve Pine Bank Road, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. 209 County Road, North Falmouth. This is the Royal McGann.
This is the Royal McGann.
Yeah, there you go.
Correct, same point.
We can cut the conversation short.
Yeah, I think a lot,
Mario,
we
Mike.
had a lot of questions, but
I
I
think
think they were.
They were the
adequately
second pass
addressed
around,
and-
they were,
yeah.
yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they did a good job.
He did respond to him.
Yep. No way.
Do we want test borings?
He said they have to have tests, they have to do test borings for each one to see how far in to put those pins.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do you want copies of those? Do you
They
think
will-
you
they will
need
have to-
copies?
There will be, each one of those helicoils has a
Yep.
record, so that can be submitted by the contractor. It's just making a copy of it. Each one has
Okay.
lengths, tensile strengths, all that,
Okay.
and the torque on it and everything.
So the helical borings?
Yep.
Okay.
And that would give us a really good
Okay.
flavor of the materials in there.
Joe, would you, Maddox, stabilize it before they plant? There was a lot of concern on
That existing happy crap
the
there.
swale.
The swale, exactly.
If,
You're very concerned about the swale.
well, I think both Mike and I had expressed,
Yeah.
and
we're both
that if they
concerned.
cannot stabilize, they just come in for an amendment that would be,
Well, one of the
Because
things,
the engineer's testimony was they weren't going to touch that at this time.
right, but they're
He said
also going to
multiple-
try
he said
to,
it
they're
over and
going
over
to try
again.
to collect much of the stormwater that goes down, presently goes down.
Right,
They're gonna
and
try to
divert it
deal with that
into
in a
the
different
tiers.
way.
they were gonna go into where the
Yeah.
plantings are.
And if they're right, when they start construction, they'll know it, and if my fears are realized, they'll be for us.
Okay.
Yeah. Have to. Like to make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Okay, motion second on the table to accept the order for 209 County Road. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. End of Narragansett Avenue, Falmouth, Water Quality Management Committee. Town of Falmouth.
That was the
The little,
oysters, right? They came back,
Well, yeah, I know.
they never, there was no presentation.
Tom. That's what I'm missing. Tom, you were here. Mario, Mike, Courtney, and Tom. Basically, it's just adding an overwintering site to the already established site they have for the Water Quality Management Committee's oyster demonstration project. It's just establishing another area within the pond that they can move the shellfish to protect them during the winter months, as opposed to removing all of them. It's a very minor change.
I'm, motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
All in favor of the motion on the table, which is to accept the order as discussed? say aye.
Aye.
All- Any opposed? Unanimous, so moved. McGantic Harbor, North Falmouth.
That's the Daniel
Up-
Ward.
Upwellers.
Ward.
Upwellers.
Yep, the Upwellers, the Ward Aqua Farms
Maria,
presentation,
Mike, Tom, and Courtney.
and the kelp.
Yep, Dan wanted to put an upweller, which is actually already
The
installed
Flupsy?
in Fiddlers.
Yep.
The Flupsy, yes. And then, Madam Chairman, I know you're not on the quorum, but you did allow me to tell the board that you did review the sugar kelp proposal that Dan is requesting to do under a scientific permit through DMF. And I relayed your comments back to the board regarding that.
Okay, good.
But I thought the young man was very enthusiastic and was very well versed in what he was presenting, because he responded to anything we had without any cheat sheets. I mean, he just knew.
It was a good learning moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
He's getting his degree. He's getting his degree at URI.
Well, you could tell he's
Yeah.
a sharp fellow.
I just, this isn't the same one that the selectmen just recently.
Yes, it is.
It is, that they
It
have
is.
concerns about?
But their
That's a different
concerns are of
issue.
a different nature. What Dan is doing in that case is he's looking to expand his grant. Yeah, he's looking to enlarge his grant significantly, so therefore he has to go back. The process involved in that is they come to the staff, we let them know that this board is going to require this, this, and this. We send a letter upstairs telling the Board of Selectmen saying that we're fine with them approving the grant, the concept of the grant, so then they can get the Division of Marine Fisheries in, who will not act without authorization from the Board of Selectmen to come in and do the survey, which you guys want when you're reviewing the notice of intent of these grants.
So it's the same
That will
project,
be-
different part?
that will be-
Yeah, it's the same
Okay.
applicant, but it's different what's before the Board of Selectmen.
That will be interesting, because one of the things that
Yes.
DMF does is look for existing shellfish.
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Okay, motion is second on the table to accept the orders as discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. 350 West Falmouth Highway, West Falmouth.
Hang on, Madam Chairman, I'm grabbing. Mario, Mike, Tom, Courtney, yes, this is the DCPC project. They're putting on the addition. They're putting right now they have the square foot of plantings within the DCPC on their exclusive, let me see if I say this right, exclusive portion of that condo unit that's there. The calculation was derived by the exclusive use that that applicant has, plus a 1/3 share of the common use that the applicant shares with the other property owners. And then it was staff's recommendation and strongly encourages them to put the mitigation plantings closer to the resource area, but that is going to require them to have approval from that board, so we are giving them good time to do that. So we'll write the order allowing for both.
Yes.
Okay,
On the
great.
exclusive use portion of that and also on the common property.
With preference to the,
Preference to the common
Preference to the
property
common if
because
they
it
can
will
get it.
buffer
If
the
they can get it.
wetlands.
good,
Right.
okay.
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
All in favor of the motion on the table?
Aye. With enthusiasm.
Say aye. All opposed?
Jump the gun, Mike.
None. Unanimous, so moved.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
I would like to thank my fellow commissioners. On nights like tonight, I may have been a little high-spirited, and I apologize for that. I do not like to get worked up like that. However, I want to thank the other members for reining in. I know it's a lot on us sometimes. I don't know if people really truly appreciate what goes into some of this. I mean, the amount of information that we have to digest and really make determinations on can sometimes be slightly overwhelming, at least for myself. So I would like to thank my fellow commissioners on we make a good team. And I think that we're going to come to the correct decision, and I just thank you for your patience with my
And let's
demeanor
just
sometimes.
all assure Lori that it's not, people are not normally as cranky as they were tonight.
Tonight was a grinder,
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
So with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, so moved.
Can I apply for hazardous duty pay?
Yeah.